Well, as we come down to that judgment, who better to speak to than the two gentlemen who were requested to help the MDC in their challenge from South Africa, Advocate Dali Mpofu and Advocate Tembeka Ngcukaitobi as well. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you so much. You've heard some of those comments. Let's perhaps start with that. And if you care to share some light and thoughts on what was said there, particularly by political analyst AC Lubumbu there.
Well, I think that political analyst misses the point by the proverbial mile. Because he doesn't understand the fact that what was being said by our side was that the material that was produced was the material that was in our hands from our own electoral agents.
Sure.
The burden, once the ZEC admitted that they made what they called clerical errors and changed the result from 50.8 to 50.6, then the burden that is talking about obviously rests on the electoral body to then say, how did we arrive at this new, figure? And secondly, it was then the material actually resides with them. So if you are complaining, if I say you owe me money and I tell you how it happened and you agree that you owe me money, but maybe you say no, but it's not the amount, then the burden is on you to show the new amount. As it is that simple. I don't know where this analysis comes from.
Yeah, certainly an interesting one. I guess we'll have to unpack. Advocate Ngcukaitobi, let's start off then by saying your thoughts on what will happen at 2 p.m. What decision do you expect?
Well, I mean, there are two likely decisions, right? The first decision is that the MDC would be successful and the election would be annulled. The other would be that the MDC might be unsuccessful and the decision will stand. My own assessment of the case is that the case is a solid case, the evidence is strong, and the ZEC, that is the electoral body that ran the election, was simply unable to discharge the burden that was on it, bearing in mind they admitted irregularities. I'll give you one simple example of the irregularity of the type that we say invalidated the entire election. Maybe I should give you two.
Sure.
The first is, as Dali Mpofu says, the ZAC changed the result 3 times. Once it changed the result 3 times, it had a duty to explain why the result was changed 3 times, and it had a duty to explain which of the 3 results was the correct result. It failed to do that. The second was instances where there was similarity of results 16 times. In other words, from different polling stations, the results that were returned were similar across the 23 presidential candidates.
Sure.
Expert evidence that was led in court made it clear that it is a statistical improbability to have similarity of results 16 times. Take only those 2 and you ask yourself the question, did Mr. Mnangagwa actually win the election? Bearing in mind that the margin of victory was probably one of the tiniest. So if I was making the decision, of course, I was on the MDC side. It seems to me that the evidence is overwhelming that the MDC should succeed. But of course, one cannot predict what the judges will likely say, and one cannot speak too much into the merits of the case.
The one worry would be, however, that yes, 50.6, 50.8, whichever it is, the MDC still, in that respect, didn't actually get 50% though. But I want to talk about necessarily you guys being, sort of rejected in a way. What does that mean for not just yourselves, but lawyers within the SADC region and being able to work in this region as well?
Well, I think that's actually the central issue, because that issue goes much deeper than us, clearly.
Yeah.
It goes much deeper than even Chamisa or Mnangagwa. It's a matter of serious importance that in SADC, all of a sudden, we get denied. We went to court, our applications for admission were taken to court.
Sure.
The judge said to us literally, here's my pen, I'm ready to sign your admission. There's only one thing that is missing, it's the letter from the minister. Well, there are 2 things wrong with that. Firstly, it should never be in the hands of a politician as to who's going to be admitted or not. In all the SADC countries, we get admitted by either the court in consultation with the law society of that body. Politicians should not feature. But secondly, in this case, it was even worse, because this politician, the Minister of Justice, was the chief electoral officer or agent for Mnangagwa, and he had filed an affidavit, in this case, opposing our application. So how was he going to now allow a fairness? So the denial is not even of Chamisa, it's a denial of of the right to legal representation or with counsel of your choice, which is a fundamental constitutional right in any jurisdiction.
Yeah. So the question then is not just about the legitimacy of the election, but also the legitimacy of Zimbabwe's legal system as well. Would you say that it is certainly under a lot of pressure?
Yes, absolutely. Because remember, as I say, this is about the people of Zimbabwe. If I was in Mnangagwa, I would say, let this election result be beyond reproach. Because otherwise you are going to rule over 5 years and people will say, well, maybe if they had allowed the lawyers, if this, if that, particularly if you have won with a margin of 30,000 votes, then you want this thing to be legitimized. You don't want it to be seen to have been done by a cover-up, like in a boxing match you shackle the other side and put handcuffs and then you say, okay, now let's have a fair boxing match.
Yeah, certainly isn't fair indeed. Advocate Ngcukaitobi, if this does go the MDC's way, 60 days to perhaps put in a new vote, would that change anything really? Do you see the election going the way of the MDC then in that case?
Look, I don't see that 60 days on its own will change anything. 60 days is imposed by the Zimbabwean constitution that if an electoral outcome is annulled, then a new election must be held within 60 days. So the days themselves are not going to make a difference. But there is a problem of democratic legitimacy, and there's a problem of institutional legitimacy. What will change the situation in Zimbabwe is the legitimacy of the institutions that are responsible for running the elections. The faults that were identified in this particular instance fell into two categories. The first was that the electoral climate did not conduce for a free and fair election. But the second one was the conduct of ZAC, which is the electoral body responsible for running the elections. Until those two fundamental premises are resolved, it's not clear to me that 60 days will necessarily make a difference. Zimbabwe is yearning for a democratic institution, but it is also yearning for a culture of democracy.
This is a big turn for them, though. This is a time when things can change. This is perhaps a turning moment and a key element to perhaps saying to themselves, this has happened and it now can tell us how to treat things in the future. Would you not agree that this is a great turning point for the nation? No,
of course. I mean, this is a moment that is pregnant with possibilities. But it is precisely because of moments like this that actually the forces of democratic change need to reposition themselves, because it is the very moment where the forces that are opposed to change are likely to entrench themselves, precisely because the situation at the moment is so dicey. Yeah. Beyond this judgment happening at 2 p.m. today, there becomes a whole lot of issues upon leadership. The country needs strong and firm leadership, no matter who takes over at this point. Do you believe, from what you've seen out of the MDC, who you were representing in some context, do you believe that there's sufficient leadership within the party, of course, yes, Nelson Chamisa as well, to lead the country to some sort of economic prosperity?
Look, again, that's not a decision for you and I to make. It's a decision for the people of Zimbabwe. All we want is that the voice of the people of Zimbabwe, whatever it is, must be expressed, because elections are by definition an expression of the voice of the collective voice of the people. If the people of Zimbabwe in their wisdom want Arabile or Dali, you cannot then question that, because it's sacrosanct. The voice of the people can never be questioned, and all we need in this case is to find out what indeed is that voice of the people. If it says Mnangagwa, well and good luck to him. Sure. If it says Chamisa, good luck to him. But that's what this court case is about. It's about distilling the essence of what the people of Zimbabwe want. And it's their choice. Whether, like the people in America, you and I might not agree that they elected Trump. But if they want him, that's their baby. And that's the way the Electoral College works indeed. Gentlemen, absolutely. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for it. That's Advocate Dali Mpofu and Advocate Tembeka Ngcukaitobi as well.